All right, we are live. I'm waiting for the numbers to show up. That'll tell me how many people I have
Sure thing.
that are waiting for us. Looks like we have a few people right now. Let's see here. A few people. All right. Hello, my friends. We are live. I'm talking with Mike, and I know you have your pronunciation of your name, your first and last name, introduction, Trickster Knives, and you are in Poland. Introduce yourself, Mike.
Okay, so I'm calling myself Mike, but actually my name is Mikolaj. So yeah, kind of a tongue twister for someone that's not native in Polish. And I'm a knife maker, geologist, self-defense instructor. I'm hearing myself from your end, George. Um, and I make knives for, I don't know, I think it's like 4 to 5 years now, and this is
Yes.
something that I've always wanted to do. It's a story as old as time. A boy wanted a knife. It was too expensive for him, so he wondered, gee, maybe I can make one for myself. And that's how it started, really, uh, years and years ago. And back then, I thought that it's not really possible without tons of experience and equipment and teachers. But then YouTube came along and told me that you can just pick up a file and do it. So I started. And that's my story now. A few years later, we are here.
Oh, that's magnificent. Tell me about the first knife that you ever made.
The first knife. Wait a second. I have it. I have it here. Give me
Oh,
a
that's great.
like 20 seconds.
Okay.
Oh, you're gonna love that. It was so unpractical. Yes, I have it. Oh, god damn it. I was crazy back then. Look at this thing. This is 1/2 inch of steel.
Wow.
And yeah, I still have it. The first knife I've ever made. And first knife I've actually heat treated from proper knife steel. This is 10 millimeters of D2, a total beast. I don't know what I was thinking when I made it. And I hacked this thing with an old file that barely worked. I don't know how many hours I've spent on this. I think that it's close to like 150 hours of hand filing and hand sewing. I had nothing back then, right? Not even an angle grinder, nothing. My father had a column drill, so at least I didn't have to drill 10 millimeters of steel with a hand drill. But
Yeah.
it was a nightmare. And my first knife, and you can see that I have kind of a tendency to make something to hurt people a little. And
Yeah.
it connects because as I was loving knives for years, right? My second great love is martial arts and self-defense. I've been doing it now,
Yes.
I don't know, for 16 years. I started from HEMA, 1.5 hand swords, and then I transitioned to Aikido, then Krav Maga, and so far so on. And I think that there is some merit to doing knives that are connected to something that you know. So if you know bushcraft, make bushcraft knives. If you know combat, make combat knives.
Yes. Yeah, very interesting because there is definitely a difference between them. I do look at a lot of bushcraft knives, camping knives, and I am very aware that the blades are very different.
Oh
Very.
yeah.
If I'm out in the wilderness camping and I'm setting up camp, um, a toe knife is not what I'm going to be looking for. I'm going to be looking for something that's a little bit of a different shape.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a thing. I think that when you're looking for a knife, especially for a custom knife, it's important to check what your knife maker knows outside of knife making. Because I've tried making bushcraft knives. I did a few because I was asked to, and client is your master and you should do what your clients want. So I tried making bushcraft knives, and it was a drag for me. I really didn't like doing them because I didn't understand them. I hear that they work just fine, but it's not something I'm comfortable with. They
Mhm.
are thicker than what I'm used to. They have different blade shapes and very different purpose, right?
Yeah, I noticed that many times. For instance, I'm just thinking. I have an Opinel folding knife here. A
Oh yeah,
bushcraft knife I hold like this,
right.
whereas many times self-defense is more
Yeah, a
like
lot of
that, right?
self-defense is in I speak. Right, right, right. So if you take something like this, for example, and you won't see something like that on a bushcraft knife. This is a Picasso, a reverse edge knife, and this is one of the things that I do. It's inspired by a Chicom, by Karambit Maker and Chicago Combatives, a very good knife maker and designer, and this is my spin on it. And you won't see something like that in bushcraft because it doesn't really make sense, right? And here in combat, we can utilize something like that. And yeah, you can pick it in hammer grip or in ice pick, right? But you need to know the biomechanics of using the tool before you can start making it.
Yeah. So if somebody wants to commission a knife with you, you probably have a series of questions that you ask them about what are you going to use it for? Is it going to be self-defense? Is it going to be camping? Is it EDC, everyday carry?
Right. So there are a few big things. First thing is, what are you going to use it for, right? Is it a combat knife? And this is probably something that I know best. Uh, Combat knives and EDCs are something I know best because one, I carry knives every day, and two, I know my way around combat blades. But uh, I don't know. There are people who want camping knives, and then I have a lot of questions because I want to know how thick they want their knife to be, how tough,
Hmm.
how sharp. Should it take an edge well, and should it take an edge from simple tools? For example, there are steels that wouldn't work for camping knives because they are very hard to sharpen in a field, right? So those are my first things. The other big thing is the size because uh, people often, when they want to commission something, they don't really understand how knives work, and they usually want knives bigger than they need. And
Ah,
this is a pet peeve of mine, and I've had many situations when I straight refused to make a knife as big as people want them because I know that they wouldn't work as well,
hmm,
especially in combat knives. There is a big thing where a lot of people want their combat knives to be big and long, and oh my god, I will have the biggest knife on the street, and it will be so intimidating. And then it turns out that it doesn't flow well, and it's easy to catch on the blade by yourself, right? So this is a big thing. And the last big question I have is how do you want to carry it? because this brings a lot of nuances in the design. For example, I have guys that want to carry their knives on their molly vests, and they want the knife to fit one molly slot. So you have to design a knife that you can design a sheath for that will fit in a single, it's like 1.5-inch molly slot. It has to
Yeah.
fit there and be there securely and work well when you want to take it out. But really, carrying is a big thing, and there is a lot of thought that goes into carrying a knife, especially bigger knives, because a lot of people think that, for example, scout carry, so on the back of your belt,
Yes.
horizontally, right? A
Yeah.
lot of people think about carrying their knives that way, and I'm big advocate against it. Because it's simply not practical when you sit down, right? And you have a bar of steel and wood and G10 going into your spine. It's not something that you want. It's not very practical to take out because you can take out the knife only with one hand. It's very hard to go around your back to the other
Okay.
side and take the knife out, right? So size, purpose, and carrying are, I think, three big questions, and then we can go into details.
Yeah. It seems like that horizontal back of the belt, that would be hard to deploy.
It is. It is very easy to deploy with one hand. So, for
Yeah.
example, because you position your knife for either left or right deployment, right? And it is very easy to deploy with one hand. But what happens when you really need your knife, especially with combat blades? And I blame the movie Hunted with Benicio del Toro and oh my god, Tommy Lee Jones, right? I blame that movie for a lot of things that happen in knife making today.
Yeah.
And there was a scout carry there, and he was carrying a big bushcraft knife that he used for combat, and that's just lovely, in my opinion. And he was carrying it on a scout carry, and just imagine not having the hand that you want to deploy your knife with available because someone grabs it, and you want to deploy your knife, and there is just no way in hell you are going to do it with the other hand, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a big advocate against it, especially with combat blades.
Where should a person carry their knife? For instance, if they have a knife that is in a sheath, should
Right.
that knife be positioned with
Hmm.
my dominant hand on that side of my hip or in front of me? Or what are your thoughts
Okay.
on position?
Position. My favorite positions right now are up. It kind of goes from shooting community, right? So appendix carry,
Mhm.
and this is something that you can deploy with both hands easily. So on like from looking at your belt, like from 10 to 2, something like that. On a
Yeah.
belt, I prefer having a knife clipped in at an angle. And
Okay.
especially with combat blades, I position my knives in a way that I can grab it with my dominant hand in reverse and with my non-dominant hand in a hammer grip. And this is my preferred method. I sometimes use in EDC when I have a sheath like that. This is a discrete carry concepts clip, and I recommend those clips to everyone. Discrete carry
Yeah.
concepts. They are a great company from United States, and a clip like that, you can change the placement of your sheath in a matter of seconds, right? Because you
Okay.
just take it out, you can put it somewhere else. When you have combat pants with those big oh my god, pockets on your
Mhm.
thighs, right?
Mhm.
There are sometimes compartments for magazines there, and I like to have a knife in one of those compartments on my dominant hand side when it's for EDC and I don't expect anything bad to happen. But if you have a well-designed sheath with like an clip like that or an ulti clip, and you can change its position on your body quickly, then I would recommend to go into appendix when things are getting fishy, and you can change the position of your knife discreetly, right?
Does that position change? Is it index? Does it click, 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 or you just turn it?
I just turn it.
Mm-hmm.
I just turn it and I place it because the knife has a tendency to go with the curvature of your body. I'm kind of a big guy. I have a bit of a belly, so it's hard for me to have a vertically positioned knife on my belt, right? Because my belly goes against it, and the knife prints a lot. So if I have some belly fat, it goes out. So I position my knife on at an angle, so it has an easier way to be concealed, right? Because we don't want to scare people with our knives also, right? It doesn't look well when you have a handle like that sticking out of your pants.
So do most people, so you would put your shirt over the knife like you would with, with a firearm?
Either a shirt over the knife, or my favorite way to do it is to have my shirt under the knife and have something heavier like a jacket over the knife. This is my preferred way because I like to have something between me and the knife. And it's just a comfort thing, right?
Yeah.
And of course, another way, right?
Go ahead.
Another way to carry your knives, and this is mainly for EDC, but I know that some people like to use self-defense knives that way, is to carry it as a neck knife. But you have to figure out deployment, because under a shirt like that, going and reaching under the shirt to grab a knife is not really feasible. For an EDC, right? That's fine, because you have time. When you want to cut open a box, you have time to grab your knife either from below or to take it out over your shirt and take the knife out. But in any, let's call it, serious situation, this wouldn't work.
Yeah. I have a knife right here that you made me several years ago.
Right.
And
still lives.
I love this knife. I mean, it's got this cord, so I would imagine it would be used as a neck knife as well, right?
Yep.
And so just to show the audience this is one of the beautiful knives that you made.
It's actually one of the 3 first knives that I made on my belt grinder.
It's beautiful. It's very pretty. I mean, looking at it up close, it's I noticed the blade is not like shiny chrome. Some knives are almost like a mirror. This is like a muted. Tell me about this finish.
This finish.
Tell me about that.
I really dislike the mirror look on knives. This is something that I really dislike in my knives, and I'm a firm believer that you should make things that you would buy. And this finish that you're talking about, this is a satin finish. I believe that on this particular knife, it was 600 grit satin finish. Yeah, it looks like 600 grit, darkened with ferric chloride. I remember everything about this knife. It has mahogany scales, and this is 50 HF spring steel.
For the people who don't know, a lot of people don't know what the word scales mean. Explain what scales are.
Scales. So you have basically two main type of handles, right? They are full tank and hidden tank or partial tank. And in full tank knives, like in the one that you're showing us, you have the steel of the blade and goes all the way around the handle, and you put scales on both sides of the handle, right? So those pieces of wood on both sides of the knife are the handle scales. You can also have a hidden tank blade, and this is where you have a blade. I have no knives like that. Wait, I have something just for showing purposes. This is some cheapo knife for like, I don't know, $3. So like right here, right? You have a handle and the tank is hidden in the handle. So you have one block of wood or G10 or anything like that that you shape into the handle shape. And in full tank knives like the one that you have, or most, not every knife that I make, you have to consider the handle shape when you are making the blade and the steel of the handle, right? So here, everywhere underneath this wood, there is steel, and there is wood on both sides of this steel handle. And it's secured with three, I believe this is brass pins, and of course epoxy resin. I remember this knife very well. This was a big moment for me.
Remember? Yeah. I
Yeah, I
think, I mean, you
remember.
sent this to me many years ago.
Like 3 years
Now,
ago, something around that, right?
this is a cheap knife. What's that?
Like 3 years ago?
Yeah,
I
about
think
3-4
it's,
years ago. Yeah, sure.
yeah, something like that. I was just
Yeah.
starting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, this is a cheap, it's like one of these cheap knives that only cost about $9, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a gimmick knife because you take this off and it's got a compass and matches, and like they call it a survival knife.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, I
yeah.
don't know how practical it is, but I know one thing, it's not a full tang knife. The difference between
No, it's
this
not.
and this is that blade goes all the way through from one end to the other. On this
Right.
knife here, that probably only
It's
goes
like,
through to about here, right?
yeah, around an inch, maybe inch and a
Yeah.
half, something around that. And the funny thing is, this is like 2 times bigger than the one you got from me. And I would bet a good dollar that a small full tank knife will do a lot more work than this big uh, chopper, let's call it, with like
Yeah.
an inch and a half of tank, right?
Yeah.
This, you can probably hammer it into wood and nothing will happen to this beauty.
Yeah. So the difference between the partial tang knife and a full tang knife is, do you
Durability.
get more energy,
You have more
striking energy
durability.
going to the blade?
Mm, striking energy going to the blade is more about geometry, but the big thing is, the less parts your knife has and the less connections it has, the more power you have. I can go with a lot more force with a full tank blade because there is nothing to really go wrong unless you break the steel. So
Yeah.
this is a critical failure of a knife, and if you really break a full tank knife, it means that either something went really, really wrong with heat treating, or you did something really, really outlandish with it. For example, I've had one of these that I broke in half, but it was on my thigh, and I hit it with a steel bar right here, and it broke in half. But this is like 2.5 millimeters of steel. It had to break, right? But if it was a partial tank, you have things like the tank prying out of the wood, right? You have connection
Hmm.
points that it can slip out of. Maybe it's the tongue goes all the way through the handle, and you have a screw at the end. Then you have to think about the power of the threads and how much they can handle. In a full tang, you just have a big piece of steel that either is strong enough for what you're doing or not. You don't have to take strength of wood, handle material, epoxy resin, threads into consideration.
There are times I'll watch some videos where there's people that will take a tool, just like a wrench, and or a file, and they put it in a furnace and they start hammering it and they make a knife out of it, and it makes for a fun video. I mean, it's interesting to watch. But what is the best metal to make a knife with?
Oh, that's a big subject. Okay, so you have to differentiate between, I think, we can talk about two types of steel primary. So high carbon steel in general, and this is sometimes tool steel usually, and we can talk about stainless steel. And I'm a big advocate of using high carbon tool steel
Yes.
because, and I have three reasons for that. One of them is purely practical. High carbon tool steel takes a great edge that it holds for a long time. Usually, of course, there is some variation in tool steels, but in general, high carbon tool steel takes better edge than stainless. It holds an edge longer and is, in my experience, easier and more pleasurable to use, right? Stainless has a big, of course, plus that it doesn't take rust. But for a second reason, and this is purely subjective, so this is something that everybody has to decide for themselves, I prefer the look of knives that are evolving with time. And I prefer to have non-stainless knives because the patina on them changes. After
Yes.
some years of use, you can take a stainless steel knife, and when it's maintained properly, you can tell something about the person that made it, right? With a high carbon tool steel knife that develops a patina and lots of splotches from usage, there is something to say about the user after some years, right? You can say, if you understand how it develops, you can see what this knife was used for. Oh, hi, May. You can say what it was used for and how well it was maintained. And the third thing is its costs, because if you want to have a stainless steel that performs as well as high carbon tool steel, it is very costly, and the process to heat treat a high quality stainless steel is very it takes very specialized and expensive equipment, and it takes a lot of knowledge and precision. So if you want a knife that is stainless and performs as well as high carbon tool steel knife, you can say you will pay a lot more for it, and it will be more expensive, and there is more things that can fail in the process of making it. So it's always a gamble, right?
It's funny that you say that because I have two Opinel knives. I have one stainless steel, which is very hard to sharpen, very hard, and it looks like a mirror. It shines beautiful, but that's deceiving. That's very deceiving. And then I got the carbon steel one that within a month completely discolored, but I kind of like this. I like how it,
Right?
and I
There's a
use it
lot of things
basically
happening,
like cutting apples, oranges, fruit, that kind of thing.
of course.
And I keep it in my office, and I like it. The carbon steel, I like how so you call that a patina, the color
Right.
that's on it. Yeah.
So that's basically oxidation, right? And
Okay.
rust is oxidation. I'm a geologist, so bear
Yes.
with me for a quick mineralogy lesson.
Yes.
Uh, when you have a high carbon steel knife or any steel object, if you have iron in your steel object, then iron combined with oxygen, of course, oxidates into one of two minerals. One of them is hematite, and that's basically rust, and the other is magnetite. I'm sorry, am I right? Yep, I am right. And the other is magnetite. And rust, when it forms, it's red, of course.
Mhm.
And an important stuff is if you have red spots on your high carbon steel knife, you can turn that rust into hematite and into a dark patina with hot water,
Ah,
because one transforms into the other at around 100 degrees Celsius.
wow.
So if you put that blade, if there are any red spots, I can see that clearly here. Maybe there are. If there are any red spots, you can put the blade into hot water, and it will transform into another mineral that is also ferrite oxide. That is practical of course, you have various types of patina forming here, and rust will eventually eat your blade. It will just do it. If you have a full dark magnetite patina on your blade, it will cease rusting forever. So
Interesting.
yeah, this is how you can protect your knives with just proper usage. You know how you sometimes find, yeah, like wrenches that are in your family for like 2 generations, and they are
Yes.
all dark and nothing happens to them.
Yes.
Those are the tools that are thoroughly patinated, and they are very dark because they are covered in magnetite, and they never rust again.
Wow. Okay. So I should not be in a hurry to polish this and make it like a mirror finish. I
No.
kind of like the patina. I like it.
So if you want a mirror finish on a high carbon steel knife, you will just have to polish it over and over forever. If you accept the patina, it will develop, and once it's properly developed, nothing else will happen to your knife, and it can go through generations from now on.
Oh, that's nice.
And no one would have to do anything to this knife.
That's nice.
So polishing, if you like high polish knives, of course do it, but I prefer them dark and sharp.
You prefer your knives dark and sharp.
Right. Yep.
That's a good one. That's a good
This
one.
is why I use high carbon tool steel.
Let me ask you, I know the whole concept of EDC has been very popular for the past 5 to 10 years on
Yeah.
social media. There's entire YouTube channels, Instagram accounts based upon just EDC.
Right.
What would you say? And I'm always seeing this. I'm always seeing these. I guess you would call them like these knives that have the clip and they're full. You can open them up with your thumb.
Yep.
Um,
So folders, right?
yeah, yeah. Uh,
And
I've had one. I've had a Spyderco for at least 25 years that I enjoy very much, and that's kind of like my daily carry. Uh, but I bought it when before anyone was talking about EDC. Um, the clip is one piece molded into the handle. Now the Spydercos have the spring steel clips screwed on to the handle, and I went from carrying my knife clipped on my pocket to now in my pocket because I'm afraid it's gonna just come off. If I pull some money or something out of my pocket, I'm afraid the knife is just gonna fly off and you know.
Yeah. So about carrying and EDCing knives and folding knives with clips, probably for 99.9% of people, the best EDC, oh, I'm sorry, the best EDC would be an Opinel like those that you have in the pocket, sitting
Yeah.
quietly and waiting for their moment.
Yeah.
It's affordable. It works very well. If you break it, if you destroy it or lose it, you won't shed a tear. You just get a new one and you're happy, right? With pocket clips, I think it's some kind of fashion to have a clip on your pocket. Probably in situations that you really need your knife that quickly that it makes a difference for you to have it clipped on your pocket instead of inside of your pocket. I'm not sure that you really need a folding knife for those situations, right?
Yeah.
Um a small folder like an Opinel, a Leatherman, or a Victronics multi-tool. I think those are the best choices for EDC for most people.
Mm-hmm.
And often when people ask me, and I'm a knife maker, I'm speaking against myself, right? What should I
Yeah.
buy for EDC? I'm new to knives. What would you recommend me? And they look at my knives. Would you recommend this or that or this? And I say, have you ever carried knives? Nope. Then get an Opinel or a Victronics. Carry it for some time and then we will talk, right? Because for one, those blades are usually less dangerous, they are affordable, and knives get lost. And especially one thing is when you carry an EDC blade, a lot of people that don't really understand knives put them through things that knives should never be put through, like trying to untighten screws, prying things with their knives. Knives are tools for cutting. If you have a knife, then you should with it cut your food like apples, peeling oranges, making sandwiches, opening boxes, cutting cord, and cutting safety belts when you take out someone from a crashed car. Those are the things that most of us should use their knives for. And very
Yes.
few people should have a reason to use knives for anything else, right? Those are the situations. And I think that most people should start from something affordable, a folder, because a folder teaches you that when you do something outlandish with it, the folding mechanism will usually go before the blade goes. And when the folding mechanism fails, it's usually safer than when you break the blade and a steel splinter goes somewhere, probably into your eye, because we all have this kind of luck, right? When you break your knife and a steel splinter goes somewhere, it probably goes for your eyes.
Just like when you drop a toothbrush in the bathroom, it always goes in the toilet.
Of course, it always goes in the toilet. It's just like I love the saying that a falling knife has no handle because it will always drop with its tip down straight into your foot. And if you catch it, the blade will always be where you catch it. Always. So
Yeah.
a falling knife has no handle.
Yeah.
It has a tip everywhere and it's going for your foot, go away.
a falling knife has no handle. Say that again. Say those three things again.
It has no handle. It has a tip everywhere, and it's going for your foot.
All right. So what I'm seeing here, this is like knife maker humor. Like there's a whole separate category of humor that probably some people are really understanding right now. Other people are scratching their head.
There is another knife maker joke is that knife maker never makes mistakes. We only make higher bevels and shorter knives. And what
That's
that
great.
means is when you grind your knife and you want this nice clean line at the top, right? And you make a mistake. You speak some profanity for like 5 minutes when you make a mistake, and then you move the line a little bit higher. And nobody knows, right?
Right.
When you go a little overboard on the blade and the tip goes bent, or maybe your knife falls, you've moved your feet away so it's not in your foot, so it hits the concrete and the tip breaks. Oh well, I always wanted to make a shorter one. So we never make mistakes. We only make shorter knives with higher bevels.
I like that. Hey, how important is balance in a knife?
Balance. Oh, right. So there are people who really underestimate balance, and there are people who really overestimate it. So it's somewhere in the middle. When you have big chopping knives for like chopping wood, it is really important to have the balance in the front of the blade, right? I don't have anything big enough. Oh yeah, I have. Sorry. If you have something like that,
Yes.
and this is not a really big knife, but it chopped its fair share of trees, even though it's kind of small. And this has improper balance because it's on the handle. It's right here when your finger is. And with balance, when you speak about balance, the closer the balance point is to your finger, the easier the knife is to move. And it's
Ah,
easier to fluidly move the knife because when you have the balance point near your finger, then you're acting on this balance point with the finger that you're moving, right? So you can get a lot more fluidity from it. When you want a good chopper, you want your balance further to the front, right?
yes.
So the knife brings its weight when you strike with it.
Yes.
And with a balance point further into the handle, it gets really hard to properly move it. And it happens sometimes, especially on cheap kitchen knives, that the balance point is far into the handle and they are very hard to move. And this is something you should look out for if you are thinking about balance. The further it is into the handle, the harder it will be to operate. So probably in most knives, you want it somewhere around your finger that operates the whole thing, right?
I see.
And this is the important part. And in big blades, you want the balance point further away. But if you have a big knife that is really unwieldy, and it's hard to move, it probably has a balance point that went really overboard and is far into the blade. So this is something to think about when you're picking knives.
All right, here's another question. Sometimes with knives, I see some of them have like a little serration, uh, like from here down. And then I've seen some knives with some grooves on the back part right here. Tell me
Mhm.
about those two details on a knife and what is their purpose?
Okay, so the grooves at the back of the knife, and generally grooves everywhere on a part of a knife that isn't meant to be cutting, right? Those are called jimping, usually, and they are here to give you more friction. So, for example, if I'm going with this knife, this is a backwards knife. If I'm going with my thumb here, I have a little more friction that it doesn't move, and I can put more force into something that I'm doing. This is especially useful when you're doing a precise work on a hard material, and you want this extra little purchase on the knife. right?
Mm.
And it makes your knife harder to fall out of your hand, because every bit of jimping, for example, on this knife, and this is meant for combat, really what you want to avoid with your combat blade is when it goes in and, for example, hits the bone, the knife goes into your hand and cuts it, right? This is something that you want to avoid, to hurt yourself while using your knife. So this bit of jimping, it's like a last resort on this particular knife. If everything here fails, if my grip is not strong enough, if I don't use the punio, so this part of the knife, correctly,
Yeah.
and I don't secure it and it goes in, maybe this extra little friction will help me. So this is the jimping, when you have grooves outside of your cutting edge, right? And serrations on your cutting edge. And this is a topic that kind of boggled me lately, because for a longest time I've been a big proponent against serrations on any blade ever. And I think that it's a function of the fact that most serrations that I've been exposed to were those a big half moon and two little ones, and then a big one and then two little ones. All of those that you see on cheap Chinese knives. I think Spyderco uses a similar pattern, but it's much better well done. And those serrations, they don't really cut, they rip the material. And they are meant for a very specific things, and serrations are used mostly in knives that are meant for, like, oh my god, people who work in rescue and ambulances. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Trauma teams and so far so on. When you want to cut like rope or straps, then
Webbing.
serrations are webbing, right? Those are the times when serrations are great, because they go into material, they bite, and then they rip and cut uh, everything in their path. And you need an exceptionally sharp knife to cut something like seat belts, as well as with a serrated knife. There are other kinds of serrations, and I'm learning about this for now. And I think that I will add. Are we off? Are we live? I can see you. I think that I will add serrations to more of my knives, because there are types of serrations that really help you cut, because they are designed for cutting. A great example for those are VEF serrations. They are used on CRKT knives, those big ones that are on an angle, and they are great for cutting. And I'm learning about them because lately I did my own variation on this idea on one of my edges just for a test, and I saw that with cutting heavier material like heavy leather or clothes or things like that, they work exceptionally well. And one thing they do great is serrations stay in material. When you have a clean edge and you cut something hard, the edge has a tendency to slip out. A serration blocks a blade in the material and lets it slide through it, right? So it just stays and gives you much better purchase on, exceptionally in medical situations, like you need to cut someone's pants to get to the wound, right? Or you need to take the serrations were great. You need to take out a lot of clothing and equipment to get to wounds and help someone. Then the serrations are awesome, and they have their another usage in combat knives is, and it's something that it's really unpleasant to think about. When you cut flesh with a blade, you cut deeply enough that you get to the bone, and you have serrations in there. The serrations lock on the bone and give you much better control over what you're cutting. So if you take a hand, you can catch the hand on your serrations and take it out and give yourself space to do other things.
There's a question.
And there's a question, and it's a big one. How do you sharpen serrations? It depends on the serrations. There are dedicated serrations sharpeners. Spyderco has a dedicated serrations sharpener. They are triangular, so you have a small point that is going against the edge, and you can use those. You can use round diamond files, but they are usually too coarse for that. So I would say that the best way would be a dedicated serrations sharpener and an edge of a leather belt with some polishing compound for stropping. So when you sharpen your blade like that, you go with grain. When you're stopping, you go against it, right? So a dedicated serrations sharpener and the edge of a leather belt will work great. And sharp serrations work great when they are properly designed.
Now I mean, just sitting here in my office, I have, it's just a simple sharpener.
Oh,
like
no.
once a week, I will just take my my Opinel and run it through it like that.
Yep.
What do you tell me? What you think of these little sharpeners?
Please don't use it.
Okay.
Please don't use it. That's my first thing. What those do? Okay, so one simple thing: when you're not good at sharpening, those work good to make your knives good enough. But one thing they do, because the way that they work is, let me grab something. There are two blades positioned like that at an angle,
Yes.
right? And you take your knife through it. And what they do is they shear the sides of your cutting edge.
Yes.
And they do a lot of damage to your cutting edge. That's one thing. And the other thing is they are really bad at making a good acute point. And there is, it's very hard to pull it through with the same angle. You will always wiggle a bit.
Yes.
And what happens is your edge doesn't go straight. It goes at a wave, and you're simply destroying it. A good way to learn sharpening, there are sharpeners by Lansky. There is a turnbox, and what it essentially is, it's a wooden block with two holes at an angle. You put a ceramic rod into it. It's included in the package, and you take your knife horizontally and just push it through this rod, so at an angle, right? So like that. Oh, right. And this helps you develop this straight motion, and it's easy for people who are not really adept at sharpening to have an consistent angle. There are sharpeners that are making you sharpen your knives at a very consistent angle with lots of jigs and all of that. When you take your knife into a clamp and you have a sharpening stone on a rod with a fixed angle, and you just go like that. There are cheap ones from China that I had one and it doesn't really work. It's too small and too wiggly to ever work well, and the good ones are very, very expensive. So I would say Lansky. If you have the time to do some Zen exercises, a good diamond stone like this one, that's Taidea, I think, right? Something like that. A good diamond stone, a good mantra about being patient, and some time with locking your entire body when only your torso moves with the knife to give it a consistent angle. This is the best way. in general. Use diamonds, not stones. When you're not well versed in sharpening, stones are hard because they take a lot of time and they need to be dressed. When you are experienced with diamond stones, you can move to whetstones. But those sharpeners with two blades at an angle, uh, most of what you're doing is you're bringing your edge into not totally dull, and you're damaging your edge in the process a lot. I've had them, I've used them, and then I got educated.
I'm with my kitchen knives. They're in a block, and
Right?
all the different knives. And then there's a sharpening. It's a rod, a steel.
Yeah, steel rod. Yeah,
Tell me
because
about that.
okay, so when you have kitchen knives, and most of the kitchen knives that you buy at Walmart and all of that, they are made from stainless steel that is very soft and easy to sharpen. And this is something that comes from uh, big, from professional kitchens and butcher shops, right? A knife in a big butchery survives for about a week, 2 weeks tops, because they are used, they are very soft, they lose an edge quickly. You use a steel rod that is just a little bit harder than the knife edge. You sharpen it quickly, you use it, you sharpen it, you use it, and you eat the blade away, and it survives for about 2 weeks, right? So this is how you sharpen knives from stainless steel that is really soft. And for example, if you buy high quality custom kitchen knives, I don't make those, but I know some people that make really excellent works of art in this department. Those knives will not be sharpened with a steel rod like that, because they are made from usually crazy powdered stainless alloys that are extremely durable, hard, and this knife in a normal home kitchen, I think it will be sharp for like a year before you really need to sharpen it. So this is a whole new world. But those rods, for most stainless steel kitchen knives, they will work fine. But if you took a knife that you have from me, or even your Opinel, the rod will do nothing to them. I
Hmm.
guarantee you.
Okay. Well, we've been talking for almost an hour, and I still have a lot more
Really?
questions. We're going to have part two in the future. So,
Always.
why don't you tell
Always.
the audience how they can find you and how they can explore the knives or commission a knife? Uh,
So
Tell them how they can find you.
I have a website in the works, so I will post it later, and maybe this is all I will say now, because there will be a shop there. But right now, the best way to contact me and to see what I'm doing is to check either Instagram or Facebook, and look for Trickster Knives. This is my tag, and then there you can see everything that I do. I do a lot of explanations about combat knife designs, because this is something that I'm really passionate about. And I'm thinking about doing some more educational stuff in the future. If you want to commission something, I have some models that I do regularly, and they are just available from time to time when I drop them. I will probably have some in few days, and there are always some knives that I have available. But you can also contact me if you want to order any of my standard models, or we can talk about custom work, but really with how much time I have for knife making between doing knife making, self-defense training, geology, and I have a soul of a hustler. Uh, Custom orders take time. I don't take any money up front. I take it when it's ready and I can send it to you. This is where you make the final decision. So you can contact me and we can talk about designing anything that you might imagine, but it will take time.
Excellent. Oh, here's a question I have for you. Like I
Okay.
said, I still have 100 more questions, but I'll ask one. What what is the preferable handle made from? Wood, nylon, micarta, what?
Wow.
Bone? You tell me. What do you think?
Uh, this will be a few-part answer. If you want a handle that is exceptionally beautiful, you pick wood and epoxy wood hybrids. This, for me, is the height of beauty in knife making. Stabilized wood, wood hybrids, and stabilized mammoth tooth are the top of beauty in knife making.
Mhm.
They are very durable, especially stabilized wood is very durable, so it will work well. If you want utility and practicality, you go into more epoxy laminates. So big three are micarta, and those are layers of cloth that are stabilized in resin. G10, that is glass fiber. My God, it's glass fiber in resin, and carbon fiber, which is, of course, carbon fiber in resin. Those are the strongest. There is another option, and this is paracord, and this is something that I've been developing for some time now, and I have a good handle on it. Paracord handles were something that I hated. I really hated them because when I was exposed to paracord handles, they were just paracord wrapped around the knife. They were undoing. The paracord wasn't really strong enough for a good knife handle, and they were, for me, synonymous with cheapo knives from like China. Uh, there is a way to make paracord handles awesome, and it's to decore the paracord and then you soak it all the way through with resin. And this is how this works. And this paracord is so hard that I've had a knife very similar to this, the one I told you about earlier. It broke in half, and I didn't realize it broke in half because the paracord with resin in it held it so well that I didn't even realize that the knife was broken. So this is one solid piece of
Ah,
paracord and epoxy now that it's stabilized, and it's a process that I was tuning in for like a year and a half before I got it
yeah.
really right. But this is awesome. This gives you great grip. It has a really low profile because it's like, I don't know, 2 millimeters of thickness of paracord, right? It has a great grip. This doesn't go anywhere, and nothing happens to it because water does nothing to it, oil, anything, even mechanical things don't really affect this. So paracord, just knives wrapped in paracord are a big no-no in my book. Wrapped and stabilized are awesome.
Oh, that's great. That's good to know. Well, I have a funny feeling that I might end up doing a monthly show called Knife Talk or something like that because there's so much
I'm always
material.
available. I'm always available for
I,
you.
I, I find it fascinating that you are a geologist and that um, the knowledge of minerals, this is what is unique about you. Your knowledge of minerals and metals is different than just the average knife maker. And I think that's what kind of makes you different than everyone else.
You know, the funny thing is, the whole heat treating process is a process of polymorphic changes between different iron crystals that is synonymous and works in the same way in which crystals in magma transform, and in solid rocks, when they are subjected to high enough temperatures that they are not liquid yet, but the crystals change because of the temperature. and the charts that explain how heat treating works and how crystals change polymorphically in steel when you heat treat them is synonymous to how rocks form and how crystals in rocks change. So this is something funny that when I started knife making and I was starting to look at charts that explain heat treating, I looked at it and huh, that's solid magma chart. Okay, I know how this works.
So you aren't just about the art of knife making, you're about the science of knife
Oh
making,
yeah,
the
I'm a
science of
big
metal.
science guy. Yeah.
That's great. I think that's one of the things that makes you very unique. Well, thank you for joining me. I think we're going to have
Thank you.
maybe a monthly knife talk show, and you know,
Thank you very much. It
eventually,
was
maybe
great.
I'll have conversations with all the knife makers that I know, and then maybe do a whole panel discussion with everybody, and just have a whole kind of a, I don't know, a knife university or something like that.
There is a lot of material in knife making, and I think that there was a story in Poland about a little kid that made a knife with his uncle, I think, and they explained how knife making can be used to teach a lot of things. Geometry, trigonometry becomes useful all of the sudden, right?
Yeah.
When you're making knives, chemistry makes sense because it has an application in making something awesome. Because in the end, making knives is making something awesome. When you put a sharp metal object into oil and it burns, it's just pure awesome, right? And there is all of this science going in the background when you're doing something so great and incredible that it's just a pretty intertwine of craftsmanship, love, and science in one place. And I think that knife making university, it can be something that teaches people a lot of things, not only making knives.
It's interesting when I used to write for a newspaper, and I did a column that was about fishing. That fathers
Right.
should take their kids fishing, because when you take your kids fishing, it's really not about fishing. There's so many other lessons that go into it. And I can see with knife making isn't always about just the knife alone. And you just proved it to me.
One little thing after we finish, uh, because you talk about fathers taking their kids fishing. My father is a very practical guy that can make almost everything. And to prove it, my heat treating furnace and my belt grinder are made in like 70% by my father, 30% by me. And knife making is something that in my father's eyes made me into a man. And I remember this little thing when I was making knives for like 2 years, and I started understanding how tools work and how to do various technical things. And there was this moment when my father was thinking about something in the house. He looked at me and he said to me, "Oh, I can talk to you now about this. Tell me what you think about this idea that I have." And he starts to explain to me some machine that he's building. I don't remember what it is, but I remember distinctly this moment when my father realized that I have enough technical knowledge when we were doing this together that it clicked in his mind. Oh, he's a man. I can talk with him about man stuff now,
I
because
love it.
before that he was just some weird scientist guy that sits in front of a computer and knows nothing about the world. And this was the time when we finally connected with my father, and it was a big thing because before knife making and before we started working together, father and son, we worked together in many different things. He helps me with knife making, I help him working on a drilling rig, and we do a lot of work together. And people don't really understand how we are getting along so well. And especially not only just like father and son, but also with things like money, right? It's hard to have a healthy relationship with your father when you are splitting money between you two, right?
Yeah.
And knife making and me getting to know the technical side of life is what connected me to my father more than anything else in the world.
Wow. Again, like I said, knife making isn't always about just the knife. Wow, that's great.
No.
That is
Yeah.
great. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Well, Mike, what a fantastic hour. It just went by just like that. I appreciate it. I know the
It went
audience
by
did.
so fast. Awesome.
It did.
It was
It
awesome
did.
talking to you, George.
I will catch up with you again, and I think we're going to have another knife talk in about a month. I think what a great topic, and
I
it
think
was great
that's
having you as
reasonable.
a guest, Mike.
It was great being here. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Mike. Have a good rest of your day.
Oh, it's an evening, so
Oh, there you go. That's right.
have a good rest of your day. I'm going to sleep in the 2 hours or so. 7-hour difference, right?
Yeah, I think we are 6 hours apart.
Something
So,
like 6 or 7 hours.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you,
All right,
George.
Mike. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.